That's a great question. And I think about that answer, I think almost on a weekly basis, just for myself. I mean, I would say, I mean, my overall conclusion, Jason, is marketing and authority. How to position yourself as an authority in your field. Because I quickly realized that since I came from a totally different foreign industry, from telecom and networking, I was totally clueless about clinical research. I was just helping my brother initially, and then became official, and then I became the CEO of a CRO. I didn't even know how to spell the word CRO when I started. So I started reading about the industry, about the business, about the model, and I couldn't really find much information about it. I wanted to know how to do a budget. I wanted to know how to do a protocol, how to put together a schedule of events for a patient on a study. I mean, things of that nature. They're kind of basic in the industry, but I couldn't find reliable information about that. So I set out to start writing in my blog. I started getting a lot of questions from our sponsors, our clients, and I started doing an FAQ in our blog. Then I started writing articles in my blog about the answers that I couldn't find and the answers that I was always giving my clients. So because I had to do a lot of research to find those answers and to refine the model. So I started, as I said, becoming a source of information, an educational source for my clients. And because nobody else is doing it. And especially in Latin America, there is very, very little information about Latin America. I mean, you may find some information about Asia, about Europe, of course, in the US, of course, but for Latin America, there's none. Nobody is writing about clinical research in Latin America. Nobody is writing about how to help companies succeed when they need to sell their devices in Latin America. So I started putting together this information in my blog, in my articles in the blog, and then I got picked to publish my articles in a couple of leading magazines or outlets, media outlets in the industry, Med Device Online, Clinical Leader, and then I realized that people were reading my articles. And I also found another way to keep myself on top of what's going on, and also to keep myself forced to keep educating people, which was my podcast. So about a year ago, I started my LATAM MedTech Leaders podcast, and it's been a success for me, very rewarding for me, and also is a way to capture information that is educational information that is on people's heads, that is not written anywhere. So I capture that information from the experiences of leaders who have in the medtech industry, who have succeeded in Colombia, in Chile, Mexico, Brazil. And these are difficult markets to penetrate. And there is nobody telling people the good, the ugly, the bad. So that's what I'm trying to capture in my podcast.
Awesome. I really like the fact that you mentioned establishing authority, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't do or don't really understand how to do, because it's not, in theory, it's not terribly difficult. I mean, you started with a blog by doing your own. You found a topic that you were interested in, first of all, and that you want to learn more about. And as you were learning, you were sharing the most valuable things that you were learning through a blog. So you're adding value to your readers, and then over time, you obviously became sort of recognized as a leader and an expert on the topic. And so some people just feel like some of the feedback I get from some of the listeners is that they don't know how to become recognized as an established authority, or they're not confident enough that they're an expert. But nobody's an expert when they get started right out of the gate. You demonstrated that slowly over time by delivering value. You're still doing it through your podcast, and you're staying, with your finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in the industry by interviewing people in the podcast, much the same way that I'm doing here.
Right.
And so I love that that's the strategy that you took to establish your own authority in this space. And I'm sure it's paid dividends, because people find your podcast, they find your blog writings, and then they connect with you. And then I'm sure that leads to a lot of business transactions. because you've already sort of established that you know what you're talking about. So people know you, they start to like you, and they start to trust you, and then they want to do business with you if they happen to have, a device that they want to push through a study in Colombia. So that's great. Any other words of advice that you might have to somebody who's looking to start a business in sort of a similar arena, or who's looking to start maybe a medical device company? They have an idea and they're sort of trying to weed through all of the sort of shiny objects that are coming at them, and they're trying to weed through all the confusion that you can find online. What advice would you give to somebody who's interested in doing that?